Why would the FBI willingly spend hours interviewing one of America's most terrifying serial killers? A man who stood 6'9", tested with an IQ above 140, and murdered 10 people before he turned 25. He didn't just confess. He explained in detail how his mind worked, and what he told them would reshape how the FBI understood violent crime forever. But to understand why the FBI wanted to learn from him, we have to go back to the beginning. Edmund Kemper III was born on December 18, 1948 in Burbank, California. He was the middle child and only son of Clarnell Strandberg and Edmund Kemper Jr., a World War II veteran. From his earliest years, his domestic life was defined by interpersonal friction rather than any sense of stability. In 1957, when Kemper was 8 years old, his parents divorced. This separation triggered a long period of geographic and emotional upheaval for the young boy. Clarnell took her children and relocated to Montana, establishing a remote household characterized by escalating tension. Kemper's relationship with his mother, who frequently belittled her son, quickly deteriorated, setting a pattern of isolation that followed him into adolescence. Seeking an escape from his mother's volatile home, Kemper was sent back to California to live with his father. But the reunion was brief. With his father unable to provide a permanent home, Kemper was sent to the rural mountain community of North Fork, California, to live on his paternal grandparents' ranch. By the age of 14, Kemper had been shuttled between multiple states, divided households, and parental figures. This highly transient childhood left him emotionally detached, residing on the margins of a fractured family structure long before any criminal acts occurred. Behind closed doors, Kemper's relationship with his mother, Clarnell Strandberg, developed into a source of constant friction and resentment. Forensic commentators later described Strandberg as a highly controlling and belittling figure whose verbal hostility targeted her son's emerging identity. But the family's private conflicts soon gave way to concrete, documented warning signals of severe behavioral disturbance. At home, Kemper's actions grew increasingly abnormal. He removed the heads and hands of his younger sister Alan's dolls. He also designed morbid rituals, staging gas chamber and electric chair games where he had Alan bind him to a chair while he simulated his own execution. Alongside these staged rituals, his behavior turned lethal, resulting in the deaths of 2 family cats over the span of a year. In his own later accounts, Kemper recalled being consumed by persistent, vivid fantasies of murder, unable to clear them from his mind. While modern criminologists often interpret this combination of childhood execution games, animal abuse, and obsessive fantasies as the early warning signs of extreme violence, contemporary records simply documented a severely isolated teenager slipping into a private world of aggression. The warning signs were active, but they remained entirely unrecognized. On August 27, 1964, the underlying tension at the North Fork Ranch ended in violence. Armed with his grandfather's hunting rifle, 15-year-old Edmund Kemper shot his grandmother, Maud Kemper, in the kitchen of their home. When his grandfather, Edmund Sr., returned to the house, Kemper shot him in the driveway. This double homicide marked the first irreversible rupture in his life, moving his private aggression into the public record. Shortly after the killings, Kemper placed a telephone call to his mother, Clarnell. In that call, he reportedly stated that he simply wanted to see how it felt to shoot his grandmother. Local authorities arrested Kemper at the ranch that same afternoon. It was the first institutional response to his behavior, but the immediate reality was the sudden, violent loss of 2 family members. The quiet routine of North Fork was permanently shattered, and the teenager was taken into custody, entering a legal system unprepared for what was to come. In October 1964, the California legal system declared 15-year-old Edmund Kemper incompetent to stand trial for the double homicide of his grandparents. The Santa Cruz County Court ordered his commitment to Atascadero State Hospital, a secure forensic mental health facility. Inside Atascadero, staff social worker Mercedes Tileston and resident psychiatrists struggled to classify the 6'9" teenager. Clinical evaluations produced a diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia. Clinicians placed Kemper on heavy tranquilizers and a strict suicide watch, recording in official intake files that he was extremely disturbed, anxious, and distraught. Yet, within the highly structured confines of the ward, hospital records also noted a highly specific behavioral pattern. The young patient possessed an unusual, persistent need to talk about himself. For 5 years, psychiatrists monitored Kemper's behavior, attempting to manage his pathology through institutional routine. Staff files documented his adjustment, noting how his outward cooperation began to mask the severe agitation noted at admission. By the time of his release on his 21st birthday, December 18, 1969, Atascadero clinicians declared him rehabilitated, recommending his return to society and the expungement of his juvenile record. This official discharge raised an enduring systemic question whether 5 years of forensic confinement had actually resolved his violent impulses or merely trained a highly intelligent patient to mimic recovery. On December 18, 1969, his 21st birthday, Edmund Kemper walked out of Atascadero State Hospital. By order of the court, his entire juvenile record was expunged, legally erasing the double homicide of his grandparents. He entered the adult world with a completely clean slate, his past hidden from public view. Yet the decision to release him was met with quiet resistance. One Atascadero psychiatrist formally opposed his discharge, warning that the young man was not ready for society. The system ignored the warning. Kemper relocated to Aptos, California, moving back into an apartment with his mother, Clarnell Strandberg. He secured a job with the California Division of Highways, bought a vehicle, and blended into the community. Under the law, he was a rehabilitated citizen. In reality, the institutional seal of approval had placed a highly intelligent, undetected force directly back into the environment that fueled his violent fantasies, leaving local authorities completely unaware of the danger taking shape. On May 7, 1972, 19-year-old Marianne Pess and 21-year-old Anita Lucchesa, both college students, disappeared while hitchhiking near Berkeley. Their remains were discovered months later in a wooded ravine near Loma Prieta. By then, the geographic focus of the threat had shifted directly to Santa Cruz. On September 14th, 18-year-old Aiko Ku, a student on her way to classes, vanished from a highway ramp near the local university campus. On January 7, 1973, 22-year-old Cindy Shaw disappeared under similar circumstances. Less than a month later, on February 5th, the crisis deepened. Rosalind Thorpe, 23, and 19-year-old Alice Liu vanished on the very same afternoon. A clear sequence had materialized across Santa Cruz County. Between May 1972 and April 1973, the region became the hunting ground for a predator targeting a highly specific demographic: young, college-aged women between the ages of 18 and 23, all of whom vanished while hitchhiking near the coast. Yet local law enforcement was slow to connect these cases. Investigators from different jurisdictions treated the disappearances as isolated runaway incidents, hampered by fragmented files and a lack of centralized coordination. As missing persons reports slowly transformed into homicide investigations, a wave of terror settled over the coastal university town. Campus life changed overnight. Students organized informal ride shares, and the quiet redwood groves surrounding the university became sources of intense local anxiety. The data pointed to a systematic predator operating on the local roads. But without forensic linkage or a clear suspect, the pattern continued to expand across the county, leaving investigators searching for a connection they could not yet see. The execution of these crimes depended on systemic manipulation rather than random chaos. Kemper operated in broad daylight, utilizing his 1972 Chevrolet Nova as a mobile enclosure along highly familiar coastal routes. His physical presence was staggering, standing 6 feet 9 inches tall and weighing nearly 300 pounds. Yet he bypassed initial resistance by projecting an exceptionally polite, helpful demeanor. He targeted young women traveling alone, exploiting the common local culture of hitchhiking to establish immediate rapport on the roads. Instead of launching sudden assaults, Kemper relied on securing his victims' trust first. He engaged them in articulate conversation, using his high intelligence, later measured at an IQ between 136 and 145, to assess vulnerability and disarm suspicion. In his own self-descriptions, he was highly aware of how his clean-cut appearance and pleasant conversation projected safety. This self-awareness operated as a lethal tool, making him easy to underestimate and incredibly difficult for victims to read before it was too late. Once inside the vehicle, the environmental dynamics shifted. The confined cabin, combined with his immense physical strength, stripped away any opportunity for defense. For Kemper, communication itself functioned as offender control. He spoke calmly, guiding the conversation to prevent panic, maintaining psychological dominance until reaching a secluded, pre-selected destination. This highly legible, clinical method turned routine encounters into inescapable traps, revealing how intellect, geography, and calculated charisma could mask absolute lethal intent. In April 1973, the pattern of violence turned inward, shifting toward a final, highly personal target. During Easter weekend, Kemper killed his mother, Clarnell Strandberg, in her Aptos apartment, and subsequently strangled her friend, Sally Hallett. These homicides marked the end of his active violence. Afterward, he drove over 1,000 miles east to Pueblo, Colorado. On April 24, 1973, Kemper placed a telephone call from a highway booth to the Santa Cruz Police Department, declaring his surrender. He confessed to the 8 recent homicides, eliminating the need for an active manhunt. In subsequent interviews, Kemper claimed he killed his mother to stop himself from harming other young women, stating, "She's gotta die, and I've gotta die, or girls are gonna die." While this explanation represents his own stated rationale, psychiatrists and investigators have analyzed his surrender through different lenses. Some experts interpret his choice to call the police as a sign of sudden guilt or relief at being stopped. Others view the act as a calculated piece of self-dramatization, designed to maintain control over his narrative until the very end. What remains verified is the abrupt surrender itself, which brought the year-long local emergency to a close and transferred Kemper from the roads of California into the custody of the state. Between 1977 and 1978, Special Agents John E. Douglas and Robert K. Ressler of the FBI's newly formed Behavioral Science Unit arrived at the California Medical Facility in Vacaville. They were not there to solve a case, but to study one. Inside, they met a highly articulate inmate who was unusually cooperative. Over extensive tape-recorded sessions, Edmund Kemper offered a detailed look into the psychological mechanics of his offending. He described a clear fantasy-to-action progression, explaining how obsessive thoughts drove his crimes. He spoke with chilling candor about dominance motivations and the ritualistic staging of bodies, explaining his actions without the typical denials of most violent offenders. For the agents, these recorded dialogues began to transform raw confession into structured, usable data. Kemper became an important investigative resource, providing a rare, unfiltered window into the mind of an organized offender. His willingness to speak openly about the dark satisfaction of his crimes gave the Bureau its first real laboratory for analyzing serial homicide. The recordings gathered at Vacaville became foundational texts for a systematic approach to crime scene analysis. Agents Robert Ressler and John Douglas used Kemper's detailed descriptions of his crimes to help structure the Behavioral Science Unit's emerging organized-disorganized typology. Kemper's testimony provided specific qualitative data on the mechanics of staging, the role of pre-crime fantasy, and the calculated manipulation of victim trust. By analyzing his deliberate actions, such as his post-mortem rituals and methodical body disposal, the FBI found a real-world template for what they classified as the organized offender. The sessions also altered how law enforcement conducted interviews. Rather than relying on traditional adversarial pressure, the BSU began adopting the quiet, rapport-based interviewing and narrative elicitation techniques that Kemper's cooperative demeanor had encouraged. However, criminologists caution against overstating his influence. While Kemper's insights helped shape early behavioral models, his highly articulate self-analysis and his specific diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia were not representative of all serial offenders. The material proved that certain killers plan and compartmentalize with high intelligence, but it could not provide a universal key to solving violent crime. Decades later, the Vacaville interviews found a new audience through the Netflix series Mindhunter, introducing Kemper's chilling composure to popular culture. Yet, modern criminologists urge caution when separating television dramatization from the documented record. Psychological assessments labeling him with antisocial and psychopathic traits remain cautious clinical observations rather than absolute certainties. Today's scholars emphasize both the utility and the limits of his contributions. While his intelligence provided structural insights into the organized offender, his specific pathology prevents him from serving as a universal template. This leaves a persistent ethical conflict. The development of profiling relied on the cooperative reflections of a man who brutally took the lives of young students like Marianne Pesce and Aiko Ku. The case remains disturbing because his investigative usefulness and extreme brutality coexist in the historical record. Kemper's chillingly precise self-analysis permanently redefined how we identify human predators, transforming a monster's mind into a diagnostic map. That dark legacy still shapes modern criminology, leaving us with one haunting question. Can understanding a monster help prevent the next one? Subscribe to Grimoxa for more deep dives into forgotten history and true crime.